We're just going to give it a few more minutes and then we will get started. All right. So, welcome everyone to Services for Independent Living's webinar today. Our topic is going to be Service Animals in Action. What do the laws say? My name is India Jones. I am the Community Services Manager here at Services for Independent Living, and I will be your webinar facilitator for the day, along with Laura Gold. Just a few housekeeping rules. All participants will be muted during the webinar. So please put your questions in the question box and we will attempt to answer them at the end. You will be able to find a recording of this webinar on our website at www.siloh.org, and it will be in the archived webinar section. A copy of the PowerPoint is also available for download in the handout section. So please feel free to download it if you would like. There will be a satisfaction survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar. Please fill it out. This is how we get our feedback on how we're doing, and we also get other ideas on what topics you would like to hear about. If you would like to receive 1 CEU credit for attendance, and this is only offered to licensed social workers, licensed independent social workers, and social work assistants, please select yes on that particular question on the survey that is going to pop up at the very end of this webinar. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to my wonderful co-worker, Laura Gold. Laura, thank you so much for coming on today to talk a little bit about, well, a lot about what service animals are all about and how we are to deal with them and what the laws actually say in regards to them. So you can have the floor, and I'm going to step out your way. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about service animal today. The presentation is actually a two-part presentation. The first part, we're talking a little bit about the history, disability etiquette, how to interact with service animals. The first part of the presentation was prepared by my coworker, someone who has a service animal. Unfortunately, she's not here with us today. The second part of the presentation will talk about the laws, what the laws say, including the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. The first part prepared by Nessa. History of service animals. As you all know, dogs and humans have a long history of positive relationships. A fresco discovered of an ancient Roman city depicts a blind man being led by a dog, and Chinese scrolls show similar scenes of dog acting as a helper to a person. In the 1700s, dogs used in Europe to track down wounded soldiers and carry messages to the front line. Therefore, as you can see, dogs have been providing service to humans for thousands of years. In 1929, guide dogs for the blind has been an accepted use of service dogs. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oops.
Do you not see the slides changing?
No, I see the slide about me.
You don't want to go over this slide?
Okay. You could go back to that one, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is a background about me. I've been with SIL for over 25 years, and I have experience in providing advocacy, consulting, and training services on the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, disability awareness, disability rights, and disability-related issues. I also oversee the SIL Leadership Academy, which is an 8-week governance course for people with disabilities. I also serve as SIL representative on various local state boards to further the agency mission and goal. I was born with a profound hearing loss, and I have bilateral cochlear implant, which I received as an adult. I do not have a deficit anymore, but I sometimes think about it. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about the occupation of service dog. As I indicated before, service dog were guard dogs for the blind that started around 1929, but service dogs started to be trained to assist others with other types of disability. Today, there are guard dogs, hearing dogs, mobility assisted dogs, diabetic alert dogs, seizure alert dogs, psychiatric service dogs, autism support dogs, and there's just a few kinds of dogs that are available. Guard dogs lead people with low vision around obstacles and help them maneuver. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? Thank you. So guard dogs lead people with low vision around obstacles and help them maneuver around the environment. Hearing dogs alert people with hearing loss to noises such as alarms, doorbells, crying babies, smoke detectors. Mobility assisted dogs help people who have mobility disability perform tasks such as retrieving objects, opening doors, carrying objects, assisting with transfers, some even per wheelchairs. Then we are diabetic alert dogs who alert their handlers of chemical changes in their blood sugar. Next slide, please. Seizure alert dog and seizure response dog. Seizure alert dog react with a specific type of behavior right before a person has a seizure, enabling the person to take necessary action to prepare for a seizure, maybe to tell the person to go to a safe area. For example, a person who has epilepsy. Seizure response dog provide help to a person having a seizure. They can be trained to take medication to the person or to beg for help. Psychiatric service dog can assist people who have depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder by helping their others feel safer or calmer and sometimes anticipate a psychiatric episode. Then finally, we have autism support dog. The dog can provide comfort in a strange environment and can be a facilitator for social interaction. The dog can help in preventing a child with autism from running off or help track down a person who has run off. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about emotional support dog. Every pet provides comfort to its owner. However, in order to be legally considered an emotional support dog. The dog must be preserved by a licensed mental health professional. While an emotional support dog can provide love, steady quality to someone with mental illness, they are not considered service dogs. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, a service dog has been trained to perform specific tasks for a person with a disability. Emotional support dogs are not the same as psychiatric service dog. A therapeutic psychiatric service dog are specifically trained to perform a task. We'll talk more about that later. Next slide, please. Let's talk about therapy dog. What are therapy dogs? A therapy dog is a dog that provides affection, comfort, and attention to those in the hospital, nursing home, or schools. Therapy dogs are not considered service dogs. A therapy because they are not trained to perform a specific task. Therapy dogs are encouraged to interact with others, whereas service dogs are not supposed to interact with anybody besides the handler while they are working. So in the picture, you see a picture of a therapy dog who comforts someone on a hospital bed. When you interact with a person who uses a service dogs are supposed to be treated as though they are invisible. You should not interact with a service dog. Talk only to the handler. When you see a service dog, you should not pet nor talk to him or her. Why? Because petting or talking to him or her is distracting. If you ask the handler to pet the dog, sometimes he or she will permit it. The dog could perform your job. The dog is working. Here's a picture of a service dog. At the picture as a caption that says, "I'm cute, but I am working." That's important to get permission before you can touch a service dog. And sometimes you may or you may not get the permission. A service dog should never be separated from his or her handler. After this quick presentation, she has a dog named Tahiri, who is a service dog. As she said on a trip, she was on a trip, and while she was on the trip, while she was traveling at the airport, a TSA officer asked her if she could take Tahiri to the side. She said no, because it was against the law. She needed to have Tahiri with her. The officer did not know what to say. So apparently the officer did not receive appropriate training. You need to act with someone who uses a service dog. If you have a dog, keep your dog away from the service dog. You're too distracted to the service dog. Never feed service dogs. They're usually untricked. But don't assume service dogs do not got to be regular dog, because they do. Next slide, please. Nessa, you see a picture of the slide of my coworker Nessa. Can you go to the previous slide, please?
We're having a few technical difficulties. You can just continue with this slide right here.
Okay, so here's a picture of Anna at Tahiri. Tahiri Nessa's dog today. She's a yellow lab. Unfortunately, Anna, the black lab, on the picture, when Nessa's previous service animal, and retired a few years ago and became a pet. So for some time, both dogs came to the office, and they came to the office as a pet. And Tahiri came as a service animal. So he was given permission to play, and Tahiri played very well together. Tahiri knows about fatigue commands. Some of the texts Tahiri can provide include the following: picks up objects from the floor, then Nessa drops. She carries papers in a plastic folder. She can open the door without the push button. She can take off Nessa's socks. She can give the credit card to the clerk to pay for whatever she buys. So here's a video of Tahiri giving a handout to a coworker. Can you play the video, please? So as you can see, she has a handout in her mouth, probably in a piece of plastic. She's giving the handout to a coworker. She trained to perform that task. Thank you. Here's another video of Tahiri opening the door. She's very good at opening doors for Nessa. So Nessa will give her the command, and Tahiri will open the door for her. That concludes the first part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation is about what do the laws say. Here's a disclaimer. This presentation is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice or legal opinion on any matter. Next slide, please. There are some important disability rights laws and other laws that address service animals as they are as follows. Section 5 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Carriers Access Act of 1986, the Fair Anti Amendment Act of 1988, the American Disabilities Act of 1990, and of course there's state law, Ohio Revised Code, and Ohio Administrative Code. Before a person who has a service animal can be protected by one of these laws, he might have a disability. Next slide, please. The primary focus of this presentation will be on service animals at the ADA. We're talking a little bit about veracity in order for a person who needs or uses a service animal or an assistance animal to have any of the legal protection. He or she might have a disability, which is defined by its law. It is important to recognize that disability can be invisible or visible. Next slide, please. Now take a look at the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. The purpose, the ADA was signed into law on July 26, 1990 to provide a clear, comprehensive mandate to eliminate barriers for people with disability in almost all aspects of everyday life: employment, state and local government services, public accommodation, transportation, and telecommunication. Can you click, please? The ADA promotes inclusion of people with disability. It is the first civil rights law which offers protection to people with disability without being tied to federal funding. Before we had the ADA, we had Section 5 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. with protected program services that received federal funds. There is a difference between FAVFA and the ADA. The ADA offers protection to people with disability without being tied to federal funding. Therefore, the ADA expands on Section 5 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The ADA was amended in 2008 to provide more broad protection to persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. If you look at the ADA, you see here that the ADA is found titled, when you talk about service animals, it is important to understand an overview of the ADA, because in order to properly implement the ADA, it is important to have training on all aspects of the ADA. So as you can see here, the ADA has 5 titles: Title 1, Employment; Title 2, State and Local Government; Title 3, Places of Public Accommodation; Title 4, Telecommunication; and Title 5, Miscellaneous. We'll only talk about 1, 2, and 3 today. While the ADA needed to think about what was available before 1990, when the ADA was passed, the number of people with disabilities calculated was 43 million people. The 2010 census indicates that 56.7 million people have a disability. That represents 19% of the population. 1 in 5 people have a disability. Back then, many businesses and public places were not accessible. Sanitary interpreters were used in public events or in doctor's offices. People with disabilities were excluded from many activities due to barriers, whether it is physical barrier or barrier because of attitude. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the definition of the ADA. The ADA was passed in 1990, and they came out with regulations to implement the ADA. If you look at the first paragraph, it talks about the 1990 regulation. Those are the regulations that came out with the ADA was first passed. These are the Department of Justice regulations. The Department of Justice oversees Title 2 and Title 3 of the ADA. So these are the Department of Justice regulations. The definition of service animal, according to the Department of Justice regulation, is any guard dog, signal dog, or other animal individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including but not limited to guardian individuals with impaired vision, elderly individuals with impaired hearing. To duty or assigned, providing minimal protection or rescue work, per wheelchair, to fetchy or fetchy dropped item. So here at the 1990 regulation, you'll see any dog, guard dog, signal dog, or other animal. There can be a monkey, that can be a snake, any animal that is individually trained to do or perform tasks. Now, about 12 years ago, the ADA regulation were updated, and now we have the 2010 regulation. The Department of Justice updated the definition of a service animal, and now today, this is the definition of a service animal. A service animal, according to the ADA, is any dog that is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disability of the 2010 regulation became effective on March 15th, 2011. The third regulation now, what that means is a service animal can only be a dog and nothing else but a dog. It cannot be a monkey, it cannot be any other animal. So a service animal is any dog, it doesn't matter what kind of a dog, any dog that is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of a person with a disability. Next slide, please. More about the definition of service animal. Other species of animal, whether wild or domestic, trained or untrained, are not service animal. For purposes of this definition, only dog are recognized as service animal under Title 2 and Title 3 of the ADA. So, for example, an animal that is trained to do work for someone who has diabetes, they may be trained to tell the person when their blood sugar is low, the person who has diabetes. The dog may be trained to perform the task of telling the person that his or her blood sugar is low. Therefore, that dog is a service animal. The work or tasks performed must be directly related to the person's disability. A service animal is not a pet, it is a working animal. If the sole function of a dog is to provide comfort or emotional support, it is not a service animal according to the ADA. Next slide, please. These are some examples of service animals under the ADA. These are some tasks that a service animals can be trained to provide. Assist individuals who are blind or have no vision with navigation and other tasks. Alerting individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing to the presence of people or sounds. Providing non-violent protection or rescue work. Carry a wheelchair, assisting an individual during a seizure, alerting individuals to the presence of allergen, retrieving items such as medicine or the telephone, providing physical support and assistance with balance and stability to individuals who have mobility disability, helping people with psychiatric and neurological disability by preventing interrupting impulsive or destructive behaviors. Next slide, please. Now take a look at Title 2 in the ADA, which applies to state and local government. Title 2 of the ADA applies to any state or local government or to any department or agency of a state or local government. That means Clean City Hall or Patriot City Hall, Fire Department. It can be a town hall meeting. It can be the courthouse. Any state or local government or to a department or agency of a state and local government. Service animals are allowed in public facilities, city hall, courthouse. A person with a disability who uses a service animal has the right to use his or her service animal in the services program activities of a state and local government. So let's say the city of Euclid, for example, the city of Euclid designed to have a CPR class for residents in the city hall. And someone who lives at the city of Euclid wants to take the CPR class and has a service animal. That person who lives at the city of Euclid can take his or her service animal to the class, to the CPR class. Okay, I'm not talking a little bit about registration. It's a common question. Mandatory registration with the city is not required. Service animals are subject to the same local dog notice and registration requirement. So if the city has a registration requirement for dogs, that the service animal will have to register, but as a dog and not as a service animal. Service animals do not have to be registered as a service animal. However, a person can voluntarily register a service animal as a service animal. The key word is voluntarily. So, a facility if you could requires dogs to register, cats to register with the city. They can do that. A service animal will have to register with the city as a dog, but they do not have to register with the city if you could as a service animal. But they can do that. It is voluntary. Next slide, please. Now take a look at Title 3 of the ADA. Title 3 of the ADA covers places of public accommodation. What is a place of public accommodation? A place of public accommodation is a private business that is open to the public. The United States Department of Justice Title 3 regulation identified 12 categories of places of public accommodation. These are the same from the 1990 regulation and the 2010 regulation. There are 12 categories of public accommodation. According to the regulation, these are on the screen. 1. Places of lodging. That means hotels, motels. 2. Establishment of restaurant, of serving food and drink. That can be a bar or a restaurant. 3. Places of exhibition or entertainment. 4. Places of public gathering. 5. Sales or rental establishment. 6. Service establishment. 7. Public transportation. Terminals, station. 8. Places of public display or collection. Museum, land. Places of recreation. 10. Places of education. 11. Social service establishment. Social service center establishment. 12. Places of exercise or recreation. Gym. These are all private places that are open to the public. If you could take a private place and put it in one of the categories, it is a place of public accommodation. Title 3 of the ADA has some specific requirements for places of public accommodation. So you can see them on the screen. Today, we're talking about the requirement that is highlighted in yellow, which is make reasonable modification and policy, practices, and procedures when necessary to ensure equal opportunity. If there is a specific requirement of a place of public accommodation. Next slide, please. The example. A place of public accommodation may have a no pet policy. A place of public accommodation will have to modify that policy to permit service animals. So remember, a service animal is not a pet. So a place of public accommodation can have a no pet policy, but to allow surface animal to come in. So January, Title 2 and Title 3 entities or authorities to the local government or place of public accommodation, they must permit surface animals to accompany people with disabilities in almost all areas where members of the public are allowed to go. Please click. Two questions an entity can ask to make the determination how do I know if a surface animal. There are two questions you can ask to make the determination. One, is this dog a surface animal required because of a disability? And two, what work or task have the dog been trained to perform? Those are the only two questions you can ask if you are Title 2 or Title 3 entity. One, at the dog, a surface animal trained required because of a disability, and two, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? So I'm not talking a little bit about surface animals. Miniature horses are not surface animals under the EDA, but are the small exception of the 2010 standard, not of the 1990 standard, but of the 2010 standard. The Department of Justice refined EDA regulation of a new separate provision about miniature horses that have been individually trained to do work or perform tasks for a person with a disability. Activities uncovered by the EDA must make reasonable modifications to their policy to permit miniature horses where reasonable. It is allowed because there are some people who, for whatever reason, may not be able to use a surface animal, and instead they decide to use an individually trained miniature horse. The regulation provides for assessment factors to assess activity and determine whether reasonable modifications can be made and miniature horses can be accommodated in the facility. That is my exception that the EDA allows an unofficial miniature horse in person that have been individually trained to do a perform a task for a person with a disability. Next slide, please. Now talk a little bit about employment, which comes under Title 1 of the EDA. Covered employers are required to make reasonable accommodation to qualified employees with disability unless do so would pose an undue hardship. Title 1 is inferred by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, unlike Title 2 or 3 of the EDA. 2 or 3 of the EDA are inferred by the Department of Justice. Title 1 is inferred by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also known as the EEOC. The EEOC has separate regulation, and the EEOC does not have a specific regulation or a definition for surface animals. Next slide, please. If an employee needs a surface animal to be able to perform his or her job, the employer must truly request to use a surface animal as any other request for a reasonable accommodation for an employee disability or a reasonable accommodation. At the right side of the slide in blue, a reasonable accommodation is any change of the work environment or the way these are customarily done that allows a person with a disability to enjoy equal opportunity. It can be as part of applying for a job, as part of the job itself, as part of the benefits of a job, for example, if the office has a holiday party, that is considered a benefit of the job. So, because Title I of the ADA does not contain the same restriction on service animals as they contained in Title II or III of the ADA, service animals in the workplace are not limited to dogs. They may even include emotional support animals as reasonable accommodation. The employee, not the employer, the employee is responsible for the care and supervision of his or her service animal. An employer can request documentation to establish the existence of a disability and how the animal helps a person perform the essential functions of a job. Next slide, please. These are some commonly asked questions under the ADA. The first question is professional training required? No, the ADA does not require service animals to be professionally trained. People have a right to train the dogs themselves and are not required to use a professional service dog training program. There are training programs out there that will train a service animal, but it is not required. What is required is that the dog is trained to perform a task for a person with a disability. The second question is a vest or harness required. At the answer is no. The ADA does not require a service animal to wear a vest. ID tag or a specific harness. Next slide, please. Our emotional support, therapy, comfort, or a companion animal considered service animals. Here's a quote from the regulation. The quote, the provision of emotional support will be comfort or companionship do not constitute work or tasks for the purposes of the definition. The ADA regulation makes it clear that emotional support animals, comfort animals, and companion animals are not considered service animals under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, they are not but trained to perform a specific job or task. That is not to say that emotional support, therapy animals, comfort animals, and companion animals do not provide an important task. They do provide an important task to people, but when we talk about it in terms of the ADA, they are not service animals because it is the actual presence of an emotional support animal that provides relief to a person with a disability. That there is a big difference. Next slide, please. Emotional support animals, comfort animals, a therapy animal, often used as part of a medical treatment plan as therapy animals. They are not considered service animals under the ADA. They are not covered by federal law protecting the use as service animals. Again, remember, service animals are trained to perform a task for a person with a disability. They do, however, provide companionship, relieve loneliness, and sometimes help with depression, anxiety, and certain tasks. They do not have special training to perform tasks to assist people with disability. They are not limited to working with people with disability. So, for example, therapy animals can work with anybody. It doesn't have to be a person with a disability. You may often see therapy animals in a hospital or in a nursing home setting. Therapy animals provide people with therapeutic contact. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, and let's talk about the EDA. What it says about the responsibility of the person who has a service animal. The dog handler is responsibility. The dog handler is responsible for the care and supervision of his or her service animal. A service animal must be under the control of his handler. That can be by harness, leash, or other tether. In some cases, the handler may be unable to physically hold the tether because of a disability. In this case, the animal must be under the handler's control by some other means, for example, voice control or signal. Confidentiality do not have to supervise or authorize care for a service animal. So if you go to McDonald's, the people who work at McDonald's do not have to supervise or authorize control for the service animal. Service animal must be outspoken. The handler must clean up after the service animal if they happen to have an accident. Examples of unacceptable behavior include uncontrolled barking, jumping on people. Next slide, please. Can a service animal ever be excluded or removed from a place of public accommodation or a state and local government activity? Yes, there are two very specific exceptions. One, the animal is out of control if the animal handler does not take effective action to control it. If the dog barks one, they're not out of control. But if the dog keeps barking and appears to be out of control, if the handler does not take effective action to control it. The other exception is the animal is not outspoken. Again, the place of public accommodation or activity is not responsible for the care or supervision of a service animal. The place of public accommodation, however, must give the person with a disability the opportunity to participate without the animal, the opportunity to obtain its goods, services, and accommodation without having the service animal on its premises. What that means is that the service animal that it be removed or excluded, not the person with a disability. And again, there are two very specific exceptions where a dog, a service animal, or an activity can ask that the person with a disability remove a service animal from the premises. It is important to recognize that it is the service animal that will be asked to be removed or excluded. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The next slide talk about dogs in training. Dogs in training. Under the EDA, service animals in training are not considered service animals under the EDA. The reason why that is because service animals have been trained to perform a task for a person with a disability. But service animals are in the process of being trained in anyhow to perform tasks. They're not considered service animals under the EDA. Therefore, places of public accommodation or state and local government activity do not have to allow them inside the facility. The dog must already be trained before it can be taken into public places. However, some state and local laws cover animals that are in training, and I believe Ohio is one of them. You may see signage on some doors that say no pet allowed, and I have a picture at this slide that says notice no pet allowed. Service animals specifically trained to aid a person with a disability are welcome. So this place, which is a library, has a no pet policy. Places of public accommodation and other activity can prohibit pets, but they must modify the no pet policy to permit service animals inside that facility. They do not apply to the Fair Housing Act or to the Air Carriers Access Act. Therefore, it does not apply emotional support animals. It does not apply to therapy animals or companion animals because those are not considered service animals. They can be considered pets. Therefore, a place does not have to permit emotional support animals, therapy animals, or companion animals, but the library of this picture must permit the service animals. Now let's talk about the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act was signed into law in April 1968. It prohibited housing discrimination as a sales, rental, and financial authority of housing based on race, religion, and national origin. In 1974, sex was added as a protection class. In 1988, 2 more protected classes were added: aesthetic, disability, and familial status, which means there is a family with a child under 18 and to a pregnant woman. So the Fair Housing Act, the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, under the Fair Housing Act, housing providers are required to make reasonable accommodation in rural policy practices or services where necessary to afford people with disabilities equal opportunities and enjoy the idea talk about reasonable modification. The Fair Housing Act talk about reasonable accommodation. So please go to the next slide. Next slide, please. These are some at the Fair Housing Act of the EDA define service animal differently. The EDA regulation, which became effective on March 15, 2011, and more specifically had restricted to the Fair Housing law because the only permit service animal which are dog. The Fair Housing Act regulation do not have a specific definition of service animal. In order to qualify for a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act, the assistance animal, that the term the Fair Housing assistance animal must be necessary to afford the individual an equal opportunities and enjoy authority to participate in the housing service program. There need to be a nexus between the disability and the assistance the animal provides. Next slide, please. These are the different types of assistance animals. They may perform many disability-related functions, such as guarding dogs who are blind or have no vision, and luring dogs, and luring people who are deaf or hard of hearing to sign, providing protection to rescue assistance, polio wheelchair, veggie item, and luring people to impending seizures, providing emotional support to persons with disability who have a disability-related need for such support. For example, a person who has depression or PTSD may need the therapeutic nurturing and support of an animal. Next slide, please. A tenant must notify the housing provider if there could be the net note. It can be a condominium association, preferably in Newry, that he or she has a disability and requires a service animal to afford equal opportunity to use and enjoy the apartment. Therefore, he or she requires a modification to the housing provider policy prohibiting or restrictive such as a reasonable accommodation for his or her disability. The housing provider can request documentation under the Fair Housing Act. The housing provider can refuse under certain circumstances one if it would constitute an undue financial or administrative burden, or two if it would fundamentally alter the nature of the housing animal, or it is disruptive to others or poses a direct threat to the health, safety, or property of others. The housing provider cannot charge a fee or part deposit for the service animal. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk briefly about the Air Clearance Access Act, a service animal. The Air Clearance Access Act is another law that provides protection to people who use service animals. The Air Clearance Access Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in air travel and requires air carriers to accommodate the needs of passengers with disability. The United States Department of Justice published the new Air Clearance Access Act Service Animal Regulation in the Federal Register on December 10, 2020. This regulation became effective on January 11, 2021. Now, these regulations have nothing to do with the ADA. The Air Clearance Access Act is a different law that we are talking about. What is the service animal under the Air Clearance Access Act? This is the definition according to the ACAA regulation. A dog, regardless of breed or type, that are individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of a qualified individual with a disability, including physical, social, intellectual, or other mental disabilities. Dogs are the only animal species that qualify as service animals under the Air Clearance Access Act. So that tells you that there is a different definition of a service animal under the EDA and under the Air Clearance Access Act. At the Fair Housing Act, they're not even have a definition of a service animal. The Fair Housing Act talk about a service animal, okay, that can be a service animal. Okay, next slide, please. They're not required to accommodate miniature horses, rabbits, cats, birds, or other animal species. So you may remember before 2020, there were people who tried to get other animals on airplanes. I even have an article that showed a picture of a peacock on a plane. But now they're not required to accommodate miniature horses, rabbits, cats, birds, or any other animal. They are required to recognize dogs as service animals and to accept them for transport and fetch to within and from the United States. They can require certain documentation that available on the internet. Service animal air transportation firm which attach to the animal health behavior and training. It can ask if the animal has been vaccinated, for example. And there's another firm that talk about, that's called the Relief Attestation Firm. Next slide, please. As that concludes the presentation on the service animal and what the NICE say, what the EDA say, what the fair houses say, and what the Air Clearance Access Act say. If you have any question pertaining to the NICE, please feel free to email me the question, and I will email you back. Now I would like to introduce to you two people, both of whom use service animals. We have Emily Sequer and the dog Dapper, and Renee Elton Johnson and the dog Arias. And I'll be my colleague India will pass them on the screen.
All right, Emily and Renee, we are going to turn over the floor to you. You can actually turn your cameras on and you can start talking with the audience.
Hi, Emily. Hi, Renee. Can you go to the next slide, please, India?
Hi, Laura.
Good morning.
So I'll come up with some question. The first question is, please tell us about a service animal. Include the following. How long have you had a service animal? How is your service animal trained? What were your expectations prior to getting a service animal? This is your first service dog. If you have anything else you want to add, please feel free to do so. Emily, please go first.
Thank you. So, like Laura said, my name is Emily Citra, and my service dog's name is Dapper. I'm sorry I can't show him off to you. If he happens to jump on the bed behind me, you'll get a good pic of him, but he is a Labrador Golden Retriever cross, and he's a golden color. He's very beautiful. I recently got him just in August. We graduated from Canine Companions for Independence, which is the largest and oldest service dog provider in the nation. They provide service dogs to people with physical disabilities other than blindness. So they don't do guide dogs, but they do like the more physical working dogs. He is my second service dog, and I still have my first now retired service dog Dash with me as a pet, and he is loving retirement. I've heard of other dogs who try to push the new guy out of the way and keep working, but Dash was more like, oh good, you're here, I can just take it easy now. So he is enjoying retirement. My dogs were trained they were all bred specifically to be service dogs. So they innately have a mild temperament and they have a capacity to learn a lot. They were raised by service dogs for the first 12 to 18, by puppy raisers, not other dogs. They were raised by puppy raisers for the first 12 to 18 months of their lives. And those puppy raisers train them with the basic commands and socialize them. So like Laura was talking, they do take the dogs out in public and teach them that it is not appropriate to sniff all the produce in the grocery stores and pee in the movie theater and things like that. And so they teach the dogs that, and then the dogs are returned to canine companions at about 12 to 18 months, and they have professional training, and that's where they learn the skilled commands like picking things up, opening doors, all of that with a professional trainer. And those trainers also kind of read out the dogs that aren't really up to par for the job. So not every dog is qualified to be a service dog. It takes the right temperament and work ethic. And so they are highly valued. Having a service dog has changed my life in ways I could have never imagined, and I really can't imagine life without one. So.
Okay, would you like me to go next, Laura?
Yes, go
Oh,
ahead.
please.
Okay. Again, my name is Renee Arrington Johnson, and I have a guide dog because I am legally blind. And my guide dog's name is Iris. She is a 70-pound Doberman Pinscher, which is not your usual what you would see with a guide dog. She was trained by Pilot Dogs in Columbus, Ohio, which is, to my knowledge, the only facility in the United States that regularly trains Doberman Pinschers. I chose that breed because I am actually allergic to dogs. And my family has had Doberman Pinschers, and I know that I can tolerate Doberman Pinschers. When you're getting a guide dog because you're legally blind, like I am, there's an extra step. A lot of it is the same as what Emily said, where the dog is raised by puppy raisers. They have breeders that they work with for different breeds of dogs. And by the way, Pilot Dogs trains guide dogs that are Doberman Pinschers, Vizslas, Boxers, Shepherds, and Labs. They use all of those breeds. When you apply to be a handler for a guide dog, you not only have to wait for them to have the dog, but you also have to yourself have gone through training in orientation and mobility, because as a legally blind person, you have to be able to navigate. So most people have had cane training before they get a guide dog, because you have to know how to cross the street and how to listen to traffic. So there are other things in play there. So that is one additional step when it comes to a guide dog. It was a 3-week process, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, pretty much most of the time, doing the training at the facility. There was housing there also. We stayed in rooms, and we got up in the morning and had breakfast with our dogs. All these were the daily living training things that you did with your dogs. And actually, before I got the dog, when you fill out the application, because you are getting a service dog that has a lot of time and effort and money and nonprofit dollars have gone into making that dog, they want to make sure that you're capable of handling the dog. So you have to have information from your doctor as to your physical health. And also, we also required to have letters of recommendations. I had to get 3 people to give me letters of recommendation saying that I was capable of taking care of a dog, that I had a home that was capable of housing the dog and all that type of things. But I've had Iris since that's when I was born, since 2016. And she was a 1.5 years when I left the facility with her. She's now 6 years old. It's been a wonderful experience for me having the guide dog, because as a legally blind person, navigating with a cane for me, it's slower, and I'm not that patient. The guide dog gets me around so much faster, especially through crowds. She can weave me through people so quickly, and with a cane, I would be really very dependent on another person to navigate through crowds, and because people don't always see your cane. One of the other positives about having a guide dog is, to be honest with you, people stop better for me crossing the street when I have a guide dog than when I have a cane, because they notice the dog more. They don't always notice the cane. This is my first guide dog. She's the first one that I've had. So I look forward to having more years with her.
Great. I
Thank
was
you.
just going to laugh when you said 19. I'm like, oh my God, you've had that dog so long.
No, not that long.
So if both of you could please share with us a positive experience you've had with your service animal.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I realized I kind of skipped the question about what were my expectations prior to getting a service animal, but this is kind of a perfect segue. I can answer both at once. So my expectations were that I would be less dependent on other people, having to bother other people just for simple tasks, you know, like you drop a pencil and I would either have to bother someone immediately or try to wait until it was convenient for someone to come help me get it. And so having a dog, it's no bother for them. Like they're happy. My dogs are both happiest when they're working. Their tails are always wagging. They love to do their jobs. And so it definitely gives me more independence. I feel, like Renee was saying, more comfortable in public. People just, it just changes the perspective that people have of me with a disability. And so that's the positive experience that I've had that I didn't expect, is the way that having a service dog has changed people's perspective or lens when they look at me. I think a lot of people feel intimidated to approach me using a wheelchair and a ventilator. It's just a lot for people to take in, and they're not sure if they should speak to me or it's just, I don't know. I can't explain it because I'm not those people. But with the service dog, people are much more apt to even just comment, oh, what a beautiful dog. And then once I respond, it just, the floodgates open and it's like, I'm a regular person, which actually I am. And so that is one of the most positive experiences that I've had that I did not sign up for, but that I am incredibly grateful for.
Yeah. And I agree with you totally there, Emily, that I have met so many people through my dog. In fact, I'm going to try to show her to you right here. Come here. Oh, can you see her?
Yeah, we can see her.
That's her. She's heavy. But I have met a lot of people, but I think it's sometimes, as a person with a disability, it can be exhausting sometimes. The dog makes it a little bit easier to help people become more aware. And I think some of the positive experience I've had has been the people that have genuinely come to me and, you know, with questions. I just the other day was at a Cracker Barrel and I was quiet. And I was at the Cracker Barrel and we were waiting to go in, and a young man approached me and he did the right thing. He said, "Can I pet your dog?" I said, "No, I'm sorry, she's working right now. She's a service animal." And he just very, you know, children will ask the questions that adults will not ask. And he said, "Oh," he said, "well, it's nice that you have a service dog." He said, "Not to be mean or anything." He said, "But are you blind?" Which I was not the least bit offended because he was very innocently and with curious, you know, asked me, "Am I blind?" And I said, "Yes, I am legally blind. I can see a little bit." He said, "Well, so what does the dog do?" And he just asked me questions and I explained to him, you know, how she helps me navigate around things and finds curves and stairs and stuff for me and, you know, all that type of thing that she does for me. And he's like, "Wow," he said, "that's really nice that you have a dog to help you." And when his parents came leave, he said, "Good luck with your service dog. I hope she continues to help you." And I just thought to myself, that's a young kid who's going to remember this and is going to grow up to be an advocate, you know, to be a person who understands. And those types of experiences, I enjoy those, you know, the fact that I think people learn more with the guide dog and with my disability than they ever did with me and my cane. And so it helps to promote awareness in a lot of situations. So those situations for me, I think were really good. Those where they promote more awareness and people understand. It normalizes, you know, people with disabilities so that people are less afraid and more aware.
Becky, And the next question is, please share with us a negative interaction or experience you've had with your service animal. You're able to turn this into a learning opportunity. Okay.
Ooh. Yes, I can give you a few. And a lot of times, we talked about where service dogs are allowed in public places. And I have to admit that I don't handle all of them because it depends on my mood at the time. I mean, if I've been traveling in a van with my family for 10 hours and I get to a hotel and a person tries to deny me getting to my room because of my service dog, I get a little short with them and tell them, call your manager, let them educate you and get back with me, because I'm tired. But that was not, they learned, and he did apologize later on, but it was just, sometimes you're put in a situation where it's kind of stressful. But, I think where I worked, it was a big learning experience for a lot of people when I was working still before I retired for them to have a service dog in the work environment. It impacted everything from the executives being more aware of it to the facilities people being more aware of just maintenance on things like, the power door openers and, things like that. So even though it's, sometimes you get questions from people, it's still with an opportunity always, even with a negative experience, to learn. But one more, the worst negative experience I had was when I was trying to go into a courthouse with a friend who had a ticket, and they were denying me entrance unless I showed them an ID for my dog, which does not legally exist. Now I have a card that my guide dog place gave me with a photo of me and an iris on it, but there is no legal document, card, ID for a service dog. That does not exist. And I can show you something, like I told the guard as I was trying to go through security, and he said, well, if you don't show me something, I'm not gonna let you in. And I told him, I said, as an officer of the court, I said, you should know the rules. And he just absolutely refused to let me go through unless I showed him a card, which I did. And I told him, I said, you know that you're breaking the law. I said, this card is not valid. I said, I'll show it to you because you're asking to see it and because I have something to do and I don't have time to continue to argue with this person who has the gun and who has the ability to keep me out of the building. But I did talk to his supervisor later on. I called in and I filed a complaint, and they told me that they were going to make sure there was training. I hope that did happen. And the next time I came through that courthouse, I did not have a problem. But it was a situation that you're in where it's like, okay, I have no choice here. I have to do something, even though I know he should not be allowed to do this. So that was an experience for me that was frustrating. I hope that because of my communication with the management that they did something afterwards. I didn't have problems after that, but I didn't run into that person either. But that was probably the one where I hope that the opportunity was taken by their people there to continue with some awareness training.
Becky, what about you, Emily?
So I think, Renee, when you mentioned, you just don't always have time to educate people and fight the fight. You just sometimes have to give in. And that I would say is true just in general. Sometimes you're out at the store and someone approaches and want to know all about the dog. And at that time, I'm, have all the time in the world and I'm in a good mood or whatever and happy to talk about the dogs. But sometimes you're just trying to do that in and out errand and it's just easier. I try to always carry a brochure with me about canine companions that I can just say like, yeah, he's really great. Here, go to the website and learn more about it, because I don't have time. And so that's not a horribly negative experience, but it is something that you always kind of have to be aware of, that when you have a dog, you are opening yourself up for people to approach and ask questions. The only few experiences I've had with public access have seemed to be cultural. Like one was at a nail salon and the other was at a Mexican restaurant. And in both cases, you know, whoever was hosting or hostessing, they, like a different person, a server or whatever, would come over and seem to be able to, in their own language, articulate, no, this dog is allowed. It's, oh, you know, it's the law here. And so that was always helpful. It never escalated. And each time I was able to bring my dog in. So nothing too traumatic. The last thing I would say that is another very mild negative experience would be when people interrupt my dog doing a job. And so at times, like the automatic door opener buttons, we saw the video of Lisa's dog pushing the button. Those buttons, the reason the dogs are so helpful, the buttons are often in bananas places, like so out of the way, you know, whatever. And sometimes it takes a minute for the dog to figure it out, but they can do it and they're so happy once they've done it. But more often than not, when people see the dog, you know, working through that puzzle, they're like, oh, I can do it. And they come and slap that button. And, you know, that's nice. I know it was all in good will, but it's just a little frustrating, and it takes away from me and the dog that feeling of success and independence. And the same with, like, if I drop something, people are so quick to just snatch it up. And again, I'm grateful, but like, that's why I have this dog, you know, let him do his job. And so I would just, the same with anything that you want to help a person with a disability, always just ask, like, oh, can I help you with that? And then respect the answer, because if they say no, that doesn't mean that they're denying your goodwill. It just means that they have an ability to do it themselves. And it might not be the typical way of doing it, but they can do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think a lot of it is about education in very often places that are not aware of their application under the ADA or any other laws. The next question is, have you ever been kicked out of an establishment? For example, maybe a restaurant because of your service animal.
I've never been kicked out of anything because of my service animal. Some people have attempted to deny me access, but after discussing it with their manager, they've let me in. So I've never been kicked out. And honestly, I tell people a lot of times after I've been in the restaurant, other people come and sit down next to me. When I get up to go, Iris comes out from underneath the table and usually shakes her ears. And people say, oh, I didn't even know a dog was there. And I try to explain to people, I said, my dog is better behaved than most people's children. So you're not going to notice her. Once she's in the restaurant, you know, she's under the table and she's laying down. And when we get ready to go, she comes out and she's ready to go. So I've never been kicked out of any establishment because of the dog. The thing is getting past people most of the time for me. I have had a Uber driver once complain along the ride, like he wanted me to leave, but because he complained that the dog, oh, your dog's gonna scratch this, your dog's gonna do this. I'm like, I'm in the seat in the back. You've done what I've asked you to do, which is move the passenger seat all the way to the front, lean it forward. My dog is sitting in between my legs. You know, the fact that she's sniffing the back of the chair is not a big deal, you know, but I think this is just people that just really didn't want to pick up the dog, which it's on my profile, but I have a service dog, so I don't see it as an issue. Like, you get resistance sometimes, but actually, I take it back. One time somebody tried to have me leave was in the ICU. And I'm sorry for being a little long-winded here, but this is the biggest incident. My father was in the hospital. He was in the intensive care, and I'd been in intensive care with him before. It was not anything that he could not be, dog could not be in there. And I had somebody come in there, and my family was in there, and we had been in there with more than the allowed 2 people for 2 days now. And a person comes in and starts to question my dog being in ICU and saying that I shouldn't be in there with the ICU. So sometimes what happens is they try little subtle, and when I say they, I'm referring to people who are either unaware of the law or have some kind of issue with a person with a service dog. I'm not sure what the problem is, but instead of telling me, because after I told her what the rules are and that you can ask me these 2 questions and that I'm going to be here holding my father's hand, she decided to try to subvert me by telling my family, well, you have too many people in here. So my family said, fine, we're leaving, but Renee's staying with her dog. And so sometimes people try to throw other rules at you that they would let you in just because they have an issue with you being there with a dog. So she tried to, and I told her, go get your manager and bring her here. And said, if you would like, I'll talk to them, but I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. How about you, Emily? Have you ever been kicked out of an establishment?
No, I have never been kicked out. I think, like Renee just mentioned, it is oftentimes just people not knowing the law. It's not, when they do give you a hard time, it's not intentional, but it doesn't make it okay, and so again, that's where it's like, do you have time to educate them on the law? Or do you just give up, or do you call the authorities? So it's one of those things where it's up to us to make that decision and advocate for ourselves, basically.
Yeah. And a lot of times in general, I think there are just some people that are not polite and are rude. And I think they're probably not polite and rude to just about everybody,
Yeah.
So I would still never trade having my service dog with any of the issues that have come with it. I wouldn't trade it for anything because she does so much for me, that and she brings a lot of joy just to me and to other people, I think. So I would never trade it for anything, even with the things I run into. It's just part of being in existence in the world sometimes.
I want to thank you, ladies, for actually, taking the time today to talk with us and give us those personal experiences, because we can always, put on a webinar and teach the facts and the laws and the rules, but to actually have people who, are personally representing the topic is always really, really great. So I learned a lot today. I hope that the audience learned a lot. Laura's contact information is listed. If you have any other questions that you would like her to address, her email address is there at lgold@sil-oh.org. So please feel free to email her. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. And again, a recording of this presentation will be on our website in the archive webinar section. If you would like CEUs for attending today, please fill out the survey that will pop up as soon as we end here. So I want to thank you again, Emily. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Laura. And also thank you to Lisa, our other coworker. And everybody, please stay safe and COVID-free.
Thank you all for your time for letting us talk to you about service animals.
All right, everyone have a good day.
Emily, Nessa,
Thank you.
and Denise. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.